Hi, and welcome to another episode of NCBA's Coffee Break. I'm Nathan Wilner. I'm your host for this episode, and I am really excited to have a really good friend of mine, Brit Suttell, with us, having a cup of coffee with us. And this is another part of our getting to know your NCBA leaders, and this is one of my favorite NCBA leaders. So welcome, Brit.
Thanks, Nathan. You're definitely one of my favorite NCBA people too. I think you might be one of my favorite people I've met through NCBA, period. Because you and
Uh,
I go back a long way in NCBA. So
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. So for the people that don't know how amazing you are, maybe you could tell our listeners a little bit about your background, what you do, and then we'll kind of dive into some a little bit more specifics about your engagement with NCBA.
yeah, sure. So I'm an attorney. I do regulatory compliance and defense litigation for financial services companies, including NCBA members, debt buyers, fintechs, collection agencies, banks, credit unions, just kind of anybody in the sector. I have been practicing law for a long time now, 19 years. That's a very long time. Almost 19 years. I guess it'll be 19 years this summer, but close enough. And then before I was in my current role, so I'm a shareholder and partner at Baron and Newberger. Many people know Manny. I have the privilege of working with him every day. We talk at least once a day, if not more than that. And before that, I was director of compliance at a debt collection law firm who was an NCBA member. And before that, I grew up working debt collection files as a kid because my dad, Bill Suttell, had started a firm in Seattle, Washington in the mid 80s. And so I have very fond memories, mostly
Well,
fond memories of working for
that's
him.
that's a quite a storied, background for, and it's funny because I always thought of you as the new attorney, 19 years.
I
Whoa.
know, right? Like I still
Right.
feel like the new attorney. Like in my firm, I'm still one of the young guns. It feels a little
Yeah.
like, and then I say it out loud, and I was like, oh, I'm not so young anymore.
Well, let's talk about how what your role at NCBA is and how serving as an NCBA leader has become such an important part of your professional life, and how does it affect your practice of law?
Yeah, so I'm currently the secretary for NCBA. I was nominated and then I guess appointed or elected secretary partway through my final term as a board member of NCBA. And then prior to that, I'd served on a bunch of committees and stuff. And I love working with NCBA. I think NCBA's mission is an excellent one, and I love promoting it. I love talking about it. And it's helped me a lot professionally. I have learned so much through going to NCBA conferences, talking to other NCBA members, just going back to when I was a baby attorney and just learning how to be a debt collection attorney. Because working for a debt collection law firm is different than being a debt collection attorney. And I kind of fell in love with compliance. Um, and that's been a huge part of my role and diving into the nuances of all of the statute and now the regulations. And along the way, I've made some lifelong, really close friends, you included. So I
Right.
mean, and like Barb Nielsen, if I don't give her a shout out on this, she'll probably be mad at me. But like it's true. Like I've just made such great connections and great friends. And yeah, it did eventually help me when I wanted to transition out of my prior firm. I wanted something a little more. Yeah, it did help me, you know, um, do that. But more than anything, that the education is priceless.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mention it because I don't know, maybe in the general public, people wouldn't think you'd find some of your best friends in the creditors' rights legal practice arena, but I can tell you I have. So some of the best people I know are members of NCBA. And speaking of which, I think you kind of mentioned a little bit about how you were drawn into this arena, but maybe you kind of mentioned about you know. multi-state practices and how you ended up here, and what debt collection has always kind of meant to you and your family, looking at it from that perspective, you know, because most people do not go to law school to be debt collection attorneys, believe it or not.
Right, right. I'm shocked to hear that. Absolutely shocked. No, I think there are more people who go to law school who become debt collection attorneys than either because they want to. I think there are a small number of people who want to do that for one reason or another, and then there are people who just kind of fall into it. Um, for me, I mean, I grew up in it. And I had not for a while in college, I had not intended to become an attorney. I had not intended to go to law school. I very badly wanted to be a high school history teacher, much to my father's chagrin. But then he said, hey, what about law school? What if, and I was kind of like, oh, I could use a law degree. My dad was like, oh, it's so versatile and everything. And then so I actually, so then I went to law school, but then like halfway through law school, my dad, this was kind of in, let's see, the early 2000s, early 2000s, early to mid 2000s. And my dad took me out to dinner one night. I think I was a 2L and was very concerned about my future. I mean, I was doing fine in law school. There wasn't like anything. I was like, why are you so concerned? And it was because of the risk involved in being a debt collection attorney, which I'm sure all of our members are aware about, and FDCPA and class actions. And I mean, this was before the CFPB was like, you know, never probably even those words had probably never even been uttered at that point. And so I kind of was like, well, I'm in law school. I'm not going to not be in law school now. So I finished a law school and I worked in law school. I transitioned from working for my dad's firm to working for, I'm fortunate or unfortunate, come from a family of attorneys. So I worked for one of my aunts in law school, got some fantastic court experience. She's a brilliant attorney in her field. And then when I graduated from law school and I needed a job, my dad actually was at an NCBA conference in Arizona in 2006 and met my former boss, Burton Neal, and said, hey, where are you near this town in Pennsylvania? Because I've moved around a little bit. So I'm in Seattle now, had been in Pennsylvania. And I said, oh, yeah, that's like 10 minutes away. He's like, you need to walk your this was on a Saturday. Walk your resume down there. I'll never forget that. And I was like, I'm pretty sure they're closed. But anyway, so that's kind of what happened. And it's interesting because I think debt collectors get a bad rap. And I think that the more good people who genuinely want to help people can be in this business, I think the better, because I think that's what most NCBA members want. They want to comply with the law. They want to do the right thing.
No,
So
you're
yeah.
100% correct. And I think that you know, one of the surprises that a lot of people, even other attorneys and judges, get when we talk about creditors' rights is how many facets to this area of the law it is. It is not just like they didn't pay one bill and they owe the money, and it is constitutional law, it's regulatory law, it's constitutional law. It's
Yeah.
it's like Supreme Court cases, it's amicus briefs, it's so much more than
Yeah.
and to a certain extent, for many, many years, this area of law sort of got like it's just it's not for the sharpest lawyers. And I have to disagree because some of the sharpest attorneys I know are in this space, and it's not something you need to know so many different disciplines within the law to be, you know, to do this right. So maybe talk a little
Right.
bit about how this is really a very complicated area of law.
It is a complicated area of law. I think it got more complicated when I shifted from just, being in a debt collection firm to what I do now. It's become even more complex, and I love that. But strictly speaking, from just kind of being a debt collection attorney, you need to know so many trial skills. I don't think there is a good trial lawyer out there who also doesn't have good people skills. Like if you don't have good people skills, it's going to be very difficult for you to be a very good trial lawyer. And so I think that that's one benefit that this industry has over some others, where if you want trial experience, people say work for the prosecutor, work for the public defender's office. I would also throw, hey, go work for a debt collection firm for 3 to 5 years. Like you will get everyday court experience. But it's true, you do have to know a little bit about constitutional law, especially now. And you do have to know breach of contract, and you have to know the UCC, and you have to know, post-judgment remedies and garnishments. And then you're talking about Social Security exemptions. And I mean, you could really just go down a laundry list of things. Bankruptcy, bankruptcy is another huge issue. That, as a debt collection lawyer, you kind of are almost a jack of all trades because you have to know enough about a lot of different things.
Yep.
And
And
I
how
think,
about the
yeah.
rules of evidence?
Oh
Document.
yeah, the rules of evidence. Yeah, I didn't even touch on that.
I mean, how do
Yeah,
you get these documents in front of a judge? Just
right,
having them isn't enough, right? So,
right.
I have it right
Hearsay
here.
exceptions. Yeah, right.
There's so much here that I really do believe that, even if it isn't your ultimate goal to be a debt collection attorney, the skills that you learn doing this kind of work carry you through so many different areas. So, speaking that way, what is the best advice you ever received?
I've ever received, period, outside of being an attorney.
Could be in the legal field, could be just as a person. What do you think? Just
Um,
what would you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself by answering that question?
so it's funny because it's kind of become a family joke, but I got some advice from my dad at one point. I believe I was on a pickleball court when it happened. I was approximately 8. So for those of you who think pickleball is new, it's not. Um, but my dad said quitters are worse than losers. And as an 8-year-old, I did not understand that. But this moment has stuck with me my whole life. And as I've gotten older, I really understand what he meant. Probably could have said it a little differently to an 8-year-old, but I understand what he means. It means don't give up, right? It's kind of along the same lines of, for basketball, you miss 100% of the shots you never take, right? Same thing for baseball. You're gonna, never hit a home run unless you swing your bat, which is going to result in some strikeouts. So I think that's a really valuable piece of advice. That my dad has since amended it because I was talking to him probably about a year ago, yearish ago, and I made fun of him for it. I said, "Well, I thought quitters were worse than losers," and he goes, "Yeah, but quitters might be happier." And so I think that's an important amendment too, because I think if you're miserable trying to win or trying to accomplish something, then I think you have to think about the opportunity cost. So that's probably, never give up. And honestly, like one of my just life mottos is just don't be a jerk. Just be nice to people. Being respectful and nice to people goes such a long way. And I think that that's been lost a lot recently
Yeah,
in society.
speaking of which, the civility and interaction with people has been lost a lot. But I think part of it also is our impersonal, even being on Zoom. We're not in the same room,
Yeah.
so with artificial intelligence being everywhere you look, how has artificial intelligence, changed the way you operate as a lawyer?
So anybody who knows me probably knows that I'm very particular about things. That's why I like rules. I'm very particular. I have certain ways of doing things. I don't trust AI at all. However, that being said, I think people could integrate AI cautiously. Um, and it could have some really good uses. We happen to subscribe to Lexis, and I use AI probably every day because it's a lot easier than typing in whatever special search I need in the search box. Instead, I go to their AI and I just ask the question. I click the jurisdiction, and they provide you with cites to everything. Now, I will say it is not perfect by any means. Because I click on all the cases or all the regulations it references, and sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes the case does not stand for what you think it stands for. I was recently, actually yesterday, I was working on some discovery responses, and I wanted to find a couple good cases to help me with my objections, and I typed it in and I'm reading through all the cases. I'm like, that summary does not match up to what actually the court said. So I think you have to be really careful. I think you have to double check everything. which is I would have done anyway because I always check my sites. So it's the same thing. I just think it
Right.
needs to be incorporated in that. Um, so
So it's very
yeah,
similar. Very similar to, if you gave something to an associate or a paralegal,
yeah,
you trust them, but you still have to double check their work and read it over. You just can't, and we get into the routine of like it was good last time, so it's good this time, and you can't rely on it that way.
yeah.
So we're getting towards the end of
See,
our. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, no. I mean, I was just going to add. I mean, it's the same thing. If like I wrote a brief 2 years ago on a motion to dismiss or a motion for summary judgment, I've got the same issue now. Sure, I'm going to go back and look at what I did, and maybe I'll copy and paste a large part of it, but I'm going to double check all those sites because I don't know if that case law has changed. I don't know if that case works in my jurisdiction. I think it's similar to how Google and all the search engines started out, right? Like, what was the phrase?
Mhm.
You can't believe everything you read on the internet. Like, you
Right.
can't believe everything AI tells you either.
100%. So we're getting close to the end of our cup of coffee, so to speak. And what would be the advice you'd give to a third year law student today? Or let me change it up a little bit. What would be the advice you would have wanted as a third year law student, knowing what you know today?
Um, don't plan a wedding while you're studying for the bar. That would probably be a big one.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I would, and I'd basically apply it to kind of like don't have any major life changes while you're studying for the bar, right? I mean, I know people who had babies right before the end of their third year, and I'm like, I can't even what. I mean, maybe they think they're not going to sleep anyway, so they'll study for the bar. I don't know, but I would, and don't stress about it. The more you stress about it, the worse it gets because you just
Yeah.
build it up in your head. But I think I would have yeah, I probably would have said, keep in touch with your friends, when like because the bar is what's looming large as a third as a three, right? Like that is it. You have worked 3 years in law school and now you have to go take a test that nothing in the past 3 years has taught you about.
Right.
So now you've got to go pay thousands of dollars to take an additional class to prepare you for this test, which is supposedly going to define your life. So a couple things. One, it's not going to define your life. Two, that's easy for me to say because I'm on the other side. Two, stay in touch with your friends. Like have a schedule and stick to it and figure out an area of law or some skills that you want to learn in your first several years practicing. You might not find a job in the specific area of law you want, but think about the skills that you want to acquire, and maybe you could find a job that's going to teach you those skills.
That's great advice. And, you know, the person you are is goes with you everywhere. And so, when I see attorneys, if there's no separating professional and personal life in on a human level. And if you treat people with respect, you'll be treated with respect. And if you act like a jerk, don't be surprised if you're treated like one. I mean, that's just, but
Yeah,
again,
that's
sometimes
true.
you got to mention it because sometimes common sense is not too common. But anyway, with that, I think we've come to the end of this episode. Thank you, Britt, so much for sharing your background with our listeners, and of course for your leadership of NCBA and everything you do for the creditors' rights industry. I know that I couldn't do my job without your help and the support you've given me over the years. So, on a personal note, I want to publicly thank you for everything you've
Oh,
done for me, because you've made my life a better because of who you are. So,
oh, well, thanks, Nathan. I mean, my life
thank
is
you.
better because you're in it, and I wish I could give you a big hug.
Well, thank you so
We're on
much.
Zoom, so
And with that, I'm sure our listeners wanted to hear all that. But
yeah.
anyway, thank you, thank you so much for tuning in. And Britt, I'm sure you'll come back and we'll talk about some real legal stuff and some amicus and all kinds of high level legal concepts. But for today, thank you for joining us, and going to wish our listeners a good rest of their day. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks.